thank you very much for joining. José, we were waiting for you, so that's why we started only now. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming tonight. It's really a pleasure to have you here for this session. So the cartography exhibition here in Casa Garden has been extended one more week and can be visited until the 15th of March. And as you know, maps are really fascinating. The face of the world continues to captivate the curiosity of the people. Different aspects of cartography will be tonight, will be covered during the seminar. And as you know, maps are really an instrument of power. Let me first introduce to all of our guests that we are here tonight. So we've got Stephen Morgan. He's the director of the University of St. Joseph, where he's a professor of church history and theology. His first career was a navigating officer in the British Royal Navy, from which his interest in maps, charts, and plans derives. Correct, Stephen? An applause, please, for Stephen. Thank you. Our second distinguished guest, Mr. José Peng. He's the General Director of City Planning Engineering Consultant Ltd in Macau. He's also Deputy of the Special Administrative Region of Macau and member of the Assembly of Macau. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And the third person I would like to present here is Professor José Alves. He's the Dean of the Faculty of Business in City University of Macau. And also the co-founder of the 929 Challenge competition. Marco Caboara, my compatriot, Italian compatriot. Grazie, Marco. So Marco, he's a senior lecturer in history and cartography in Hong Kong Science and Technology University. He's the author of the book Regnum China, the printed Western maps of China until 1735, contain reproduction of more than 127 printed European maps of Ming and Qing China dynasty from 1584 to 1735, and the book was just launched a few weeks ago, correct?
Published a year ago, but review numbers of China.
Okay, you will talk more about that also during your presentation. And finally, it's my pleasure also to present you Angela Gilles. Angela. For those who don't know Angela, she's a special collection librarian with a master's degree in museology, and she worked for 5 years in the Livraria Joanina, which is the library of Coimbra, and where she took care in Coimbra of the old books from the 16th, 17th century. And currently, she is one of the persons that is in charge of the global mapping of Macau project that Macau University of Science and Technology has. Thank you, Pedro. And by the way, let me introduce you. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you. It's good to see you tonight. And okay, so without further ado, let's. I know you are in a rush. I know. Let me just call the first speaker, Stephen Morgan, and now I'm gonna open the PowerPoint, right? Which is mapping what matters. Okay, so you can be sitting or in, I prefer, and then you can write this, okay?
I'm sorry to be up here so quickly, but I've managed to make the entry in my diary incorrectly. I thought we were starting at 4 o'clock this afternoon, And I woke up this morning and the first thing I saw was the poster and realized that we were starting at 6 o'clock, and I have a dinner engagement, unfortunately. And I'm really disappointed because I wanted to hear the other presentations. But I'm going to talk. Okay, how is this working? I see. I'm going to talk very briefly. I'm going to get a lot of slides. I'm going to get them very quickly. But I'm talking about a hypothesis that struck me as I was walking around this exhibition and listening to some really rather interesting remarks from the other speakers. And the hypothesis is that when we make maps, we map what matters and we don't map what doesn't. It might seem obvious, but I want to explore how that might be so, because it clearly wasn't obvious to the people who were looking at some of these historical maps. And so to do that, we need to ask ourselves some questions. We need to ask ourselves when we started making maps, why we make maps. We need to look at a historical problem, the problem of anachronism, and we need to look at the problem of perspective. And I think once we've done that, it will be obvious that the hypothesis is sound. So when did we start making maps? Well, if we're going to talk about that, the first thing we have to determine is what we think a map is. And I'm giving a broad definition. I'm taking maps, charts, and plans together. And in the exhibition, we have this 1848 Belcher map, which is conveniently, does this work like this? Fantastic. There's a map, and there's a chart, lots of soundings going up the river, and there's a plan. And it, broadly, maps, charts, and plans, I think we can take as being, for the purposes of this evening, within the scope of what we're talking about. Now, in prehistory, man started making maps. This mammoth tusk ivory map dates from about 25,000 years before present. So it's found in Central Europe. The engravings on it are supposed to be, we think, at least, rivers and mountains and trees. So humans have been making maps for a very, very long time. If we move forward into the period of history in the ancient world, of course we've got to consider a whole series of civilizations. I'm going to show a map from Babylon. We're going to think about the Greek world, we're going to think about the Roman world and the Arabic world. Here, of course, we've got later papers on mapping in China, India as well. So, why do we make maps? Well, we make them for practical purposes, fairly obviously. And I think the first practical purpose we make maps for is navigation. That's certainly what that mammoth tusk was for. I mean, here is a standard 17th century Atlantic map. It's a Portolan chart, which means that the distances and magnetic bearings are about right. And you can see the course lines on there, which are terribly important if you're trying to navigate when you haven't got reasonable clocks. You can't tell how far east or west you are, so you really do need to be setting off in the right direction. And those kind of maps are pretty standard. And most of us will have seen those at some point or another. Now, we also map for property right purposes, to mark what we own. And just a very simple example of that, this is every plot of land in the UK now forms part of what's called the land registry, and we chart everybody's bit of land. And so the owner of this title owns the bit that's outlined in red, and there will be rights of way and various other permissions over the bit that's red and yellow. It's just a statement of who we are and what we own. Military and political purposes, fairly obviously, and we're going to hear quite a lot about that a little bit later. But for example, this is an interesting map. It's a 1957 map of the southeast of England. It's produced, it's a Polish copy of a Soviet original. And the places have all got names spelt as they would have to be spelt in Polish to pronounce them like the locals would pronounce. So height of the Cold War, if you're going to invade England, you're going to come in probably through Kent, and you're going to come past Maidstone. Well, it doesn't look like Maidstone. And you might come into Southend-on-Sea, which is actually how the people of Southend-on-Sea say Southend-on-Sea. So, I mean, that's a classic military map. Interesting that it should be done in that way. Here's a German map from 1941. This is a map that tells us what is Germany. Now, the eagle-eyed of you will note that this little bit here is about the same shape as Austria. This little bit here is about the same shape as the Czech Republic. And all of this is Poland. By the way, Strasbourg is there. In this map, Strasbourg's in Germany. Clearly, a view being given. That's what mattered. That's what mattered to them. They were trying to get a message across, and that is Greater Germany. So we do that for military and practical purposes. We map things for religious purposes. This is a map that's in the exhibition here today. This is Macau Diocese in 1884. Actually, it's not a complete map of Macau Diocese. There's the Macau Diocese, which is red. It's faded a bit. There's the Hong Kong Diocese, which is white. This is all the Archdiocese of Canton. The bit that's missing is down here, because in 1884, Hainan Island still belonged to the Diocese of Macau. It was traded with the French in 1907, so that the French could have Indochina and Hainan, and they'd leave Guangzhou Canton to the Portuguese. In fact, my former librarian at USJ is currently writing a doctoral thesis on this in Portugal at the moment on the transfer of jurisdictions. But there we are. It's a religious map. It's a map that shows things in their religious context. We also make maps for status purposes. Now, I'm going to show you, this is on the wall of the Portuguese ambassador to the Vatican's dining room. It's the most remarkable room. I mean, it's just full of these maps on the wall. I mean, they're great works of art for a start, but they're status maps, you know. There's the caravel going off, Portugal rescuing the world from itself. And in this part of the world, this is on another wall there. There's the Padroado cross for Macau, and there's the Padroado cross for Timor. So, I mean, these are statements of status and their works of art. And I think you're going to hear a great deal more about the artistic quality of these maps as we go on. But the problem of anachronism. My goodness me, we're pleased with ourselves. We do think we're clever, and we do think our ancestors were a bit daft and a bit stupid and didn't know very much. Well, I don't think that's true. I'm a historian by training, and every single day that I look at a fundamentally primary historical source, I come up against this. I come up against the radical similarity of our ancestors. They ate much the same kind of things that we ate. They got born, they grew up, they fell in love, they had sex, they had children, they got ill, they died. Radically similar to us. But they're also radically dissimilar, because the things that mattered to them are very often very different than the things that matter to us. And the obvious example of that in the modern world is, at least in Europe, the extent to which religion infused everybody's mindset for a very long time. And we're going to see how that works out. Don't believe people who tell you our ancestors thought the world was flat. Nobody thought the world was flat for a very, very long time. And we might see some examples of that. This, for example, this is a Babylonian map. It's about 2,600 years old, and it has Babylon right in the middle of the world. And the world, as you can see, is round. And here's the Mediterranean, and here's the Indian Ocean, Asia down here, Europe here, Africa here, Europe here. They knew the world was round. As did Ptolemy. This is a copy from the 15th century of Ptolemy's great world map, the Ekumenos, which is about 1,800 years old. Ptolemy knew the world was round, and by the way, he calculated how far it was around, calculated the circumference. He was out by about 10%. It's not bad going, frankly. It's a bit of an accident. If you hit land about 1,400 miles earlier than you thought you were, it's a bit of a navigational disaster, but they hadn't discovered the Americas at that stage. So there you are. You know, what an interesting map. Orientation. The clue is in the word orient. When we were looking around these exhibitions, the maps in the exhibition here, a number of people I heard making funny remarks about orientation. Why did so many of our earlier maps in Europe end up with the east at the top? Any idea? Every single morning, medieval Christians would have prayed this from the Benedictus: Visitavit nos oriens ex alto. He, the Saviour, will visit us like the light from the east on high. Salvation comes from the east in that worldview. Well, then putting east at the top of a map is a pretty obvious thing to do. And you have this in the Mappa Mundi. This dates from about 1300. It's in Hereford in England. It once went on a world tour and cost the cathedral £1 million, which is quite funny. But there you have it. You see, there's the east and there's Jerusalem right in the middle. And Jerusalem, there's the Cotton map, is about 1,000 years old. But again, this is the east. So why Jerusalem in the middle? Well, because it was considered, and the Christians prayed this every day, that Mount Zion, the mountain on which Jerusalem is built, is the true pole of the earth. You would orientate it like that. And there it is. It's that bit there. There we are, that nice little bit of Jerusalem. Do you ever think about the world that way up? I reckon if you were an Australian, you might, or an Argentinian. There's no reason why we should have north at the top. It's just a convention to us. It doesn't exist at a kind of cosmological perspective. And in case you think that's just a clever modern trick, this is the Tabula Rogeriana, made for King Roger II of Sicily in 1154 by Muhammad al-Isidro, an Arabic cartographer. It's a remarkable map. And again, the world from a different perspective. So what were our ancestors trying to show has got to be a question we have to ask. And this is in the exhibition. This is the Cook map of Macau. Well, what Cook was trying to show was where you could anchor your boat. So he's not really terribly interested in the land, except insofar as it's helpful for navigation purposes. But he's got a few depth soundings so you don't run aground. If you were going from London up here to Naples or Rome here in 1254, you wanted to know how far it was from the one town you needed to go to the next one. You weren't interested in the distance, for example, between Venice and Milan. Why were you interested? You weren't going to Venice, you were going from Milan towards Rome. And so they produced these maps, these itineraria. They're a different shape. They map what matters to their task. And this is detail from another strip map. This is the most impossible word to pronounce. It's the Tabula Peutingeriana. And it's a fantastic strip map of the Roman cursus publicus, the Roman public roads. It's about I can't think in metric. It's 22 feet long and about a foot wide. What's that, 6.7 something meters long and about 35 centimeters wide. And it's the Roman public road system with Rome in the middle. And this bit here is Dalmatia going down into Greece and off to Jerusalem. And this bit here is Europe. And it's important because what it shows is the distance between roads on the Roman public road system. As we know, all roads lead to Rome. So, how much did they know? Well, we're back to charts again. This is the 1912 chart in the exhibition here of Macau, and you'll see there are an awful lot of depth markers here, much more than Cook knew. Okay, 130 years later, lots more depth. So, problem of perspective. I want to talk about projection. That's a very, very interesting map. Think about the colours. The green countries are safe. That is, they're democracies. The yellow and orange countries are not so safe. And of course, the red countries are not at all safe. There's a value judgment in that map. And what they're mapping the world with a very, very particular perspective there. What matters is the message they're getting across. Politics is terribly important. We're all familiar with this as a map. This makes claims. They're not uncontroversial claims, or rather, I should say, they're entirely uncontroversial claims here, but outside here, they're not uncontroversial. Or this one, a map of the British Empire at its height in 1921, with flags showing all the colonies all around the world, supporting the argument that the sun never set on the British Empire. My grandfather, who was a colonial soldier, said that the reason the sun never set on the British Empire was God wouldn't trust an Englishman in the dark. We're Welsh, not English. So, other people will talk about projections, how you put a globe onto a flat surface, and I think you're probably all familiar with this image of the world, which is the Mercator projection, which ensures that distances east to west are respected. But in order to do that, distances north to south get distorted, and you end up with some really strange things, like Greenland looks huge. India is about the same size as Britain. Well, clearly not so. You could, in fact, look at Africa and realize just how big it is. There we are. You can get the US, China, India, Eastern Europe, most of Western Europe, stuck Britain out in Madagascar, it's probably to do with Brexit, and Japan, all within Africa. That gives you an idea of how big Africa is. And if you look at the Gall-Peters projection, which, here's the Mercator projection, if you look at the Gall-Peters projection, which respects shape but mostly overall land area, you suddenly see Africa's absolutely bloody huge. So, projections. And finally, priorities. Here's an interesting map. This is a map of the world's population in 2020. Here's China, here's India, Western Europe, the Americas. In 1500, it looked like that. So if you're mapping populations, if you want to give a visual exploration of populations, that's the kind of map you produce. There's the world's military spending. Okay? I'm rather heartened by this because they appear to be giving Ireland a share of Britain's defence budget. So we'll be asking for a contribution for St. Patrick's Day tomorrow. But as you can see, the US is just so much larger than everywhere else. So if what you want to show in your map is this is how you're going to show it. And finally, just some very familiar maps. We all know Harry Beck's 1933 London Underground map. It's a terrible distortion. The London Underground isn't that shape at all. The London Underground is that shape. Okay? But if you're travelling on the London Underground, what you're interested in is the relationship of one station to the next. You're not really interested in what it's like on the surface, which of course gives rise to the great game, which I used to play a lot when I was in London, of in this part of the world, of somebody coming out of Warren Street Tube asking you where Euston was, and you'd tell them the road distance, which was about 300 metres. But if they went back down the tube that they'd just come out of, they were actually in the same station. But we have this. We have this all over the place. So there you are. And of course, that map gave rise, the Harry Beck map gave rise to copies all over the world. And there's the Hong Kong MTR map. So I told you I could get through 70 slides pretty quickly. This is the Cantino planisphere. It's in the map. This is really what kicked it off. One of the people looking at this in this exhibition was saying, oh, well, yeah, the Portuguese only mapped the bits they knew. They didn't know the other bits. Well, I spent a large part of my childhood in East Africa. That's not a bad chart or not a bad map of the East African coast. But the Portuguese weren't trading in East Africa. They were trading in the Bight of Guinea, and there's a lot of detail there. Why did they decorate this map like they did? Because we map what matters, and we don't map what doesn't. Thank you. You can ask him the question.
We will do a live WhatsApp stream so he can answer the questions. So, Stephen, thank you so much. I think it was a great presentation, about the historical perspective of maps. So I learned a lot of things in this presentation. And now we are going to pass to our second guest. Our second guest tonight is going to be José Chui Peng. And his view will be more about urbanism. So urbanism development of Macau, opportunity challenges, but also the future of Macau. You know, there is a lot of new reclaimed lands, right? New islands coming up. So it will be, we are really looking forward to hear your presentation. Thank you so much. Let me just open here. This one, right? Yeah, it's taking time because that means.
Okay, good evening. It's my pleasure to have a chance to share with you some of my views. And my title is A Brief Review of Macau Urban Development because Marco invited me to talk on this topic with 15 minutes only. And I think Macau history has been much longer than 15 minutes. But I'll try my very best to let you know what Macau is all about, as long as I can get my slides going. But anyways, I will have 3 parts. The first part is going to be Macau's urban characters and planning. So what shaped Macau, not in the sense of a map, but the history that was behind it, what gets on the map. And the second is the challenge and opportunities. What are we facing now? And then the last part is some future considerations, points that, you know, maybe we can all think about how to make Macau a better city, a more enjoyable city. That's what I am planning to do.
Just 1
Yes.
second, because there is a problem opening here.
You need to.
Izu go there.
USB.
Yeah, it's here, but yeah, it's. Okay, let me try here.
That guy also.
Okay, please. Well, so while we're waiting, I'll tell you my stories. Well, I started out as a civil engineer, and then I got my master's in Berkeley as a structural engineer. And then I started out doing something that I never thought I would be doing, which is oil drilling platforms. So that was in California, and I graduated in 1983. So don't trust I look very young. I am kind of old. I'm qualified to be retired. And so actually we started out designing the oil platform, and then after 7 years or so, my father called me and said maybe it's time to come home. And as a good son, Chinese son, as being the older one, I always have no choice. But actually, I told them, so long as I can get my professional license in the States, I'll come back. If not, I won't, because if things don't work out, I can't go back. Okay? And fortunately, I was lucky enough to get it in one shot, and then so here I am, back to Macau. And then after that, Macau handover is looming. And I was looking at the city and say, well, it's a wonderful city, but how can we make it more wonderful? That takes, urban planners to do that. And then there weren't too many Chinese people doing that, so I say, why not be the first guy? So, are we ready?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let's see. This one? This one? Okay. So, some more stories. So in 1997, I went to Tsinghua University to get my degrees in urban planning. So actually, started out as an engineer, ended up as a planner. So I think more in the mathematical sense, more systematic, so it's not so romantic. So you may have to bear with me because I can see the people here may be more passionate, but I'll try to be more mathematical. So if you get bored, raise your hand, I'll pass on to the next page.
Jose, you will have to tell more stories because there is a... So the PowerPoint cannot be seen here, but can be seen here. I don't know what's up.
Okay, more stories. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, just use the USB. And then actually my PhD thesis, actually I did a suggestions for the future government at that point, because in 1999, that's before the handover, I did the plan and have 3 scenarios, and you can actually search it in the Macau Foundation library, the virtual libraries, and type my name in, and you can see what I did. And actually, I'm very proud to say there's one number, I couldn't believe it. After 20 years, my projected population was actually right on the number. Now, let's see if I can get on the number. Wonderful. Please give a big hand of applause to my wonderful friend, Marco. Okay. Now, I'm going to get started. Okay, so that I told you already. So the next one is what Macau's characters, okay? Because Macau cannot grow out of its past. We are from the past, and our root is deeply grounded on the past. And actually, when we look to the future, even under the Chinese planning, the government central planning, we still didn't leave our history behind, which is a generous thinking of we can actually be happy. And I think Mr. José and Donesh is here. He'll be very happy to see that. The one center, Macau has 3 missions from the government. But actually, even they don't tell us, I think we'll still probably be doing the same thing. May not have the same name, that's all. And I think it's a journey of gastronomy and good scenery. Macau is a beautiful city. One center, we want to be the center of tourism and leisure. I think we have plenty to show that why we can do it. Second point, actually, we want to be the China and Portuguese-speaking countries trading platform. Why we have the chance to do it? Because we seem to understand each other. And actually, what put Macau on the map in the international scene, UNESCO, say we are a heritage city, is a combination of Chinese and Portuguese and even Moorish buildings and wonderful plazas. So you can see that we have a mix that the Chinese and Portuguese encounter, actually the European encounter, I would say, is giving us another rich push to be a better city. And the last point, actually, China say, well, we should be doing a multicultural exchange cooperation base with an emphasis on Chinese culture. Actually, you can look at this thing. The dissemination of Western learnings to the Orient, mathematics, geography, astronomies, all came from the West. And there's no hiding it. We are proud to be using it. But also at the same time, the Chinese great learnings got translated in Macau and pushed to the West. So this is really a multicultural base by definition. And so actually what the central government tells us to do, we can tell them that we know that all along. And we'll be doing it better than you planned. Okay? So actually, I start out as a spatial plan, not a map, but what Macau looks like. Now, if you would bear with me, take a look at this thing for 10 seconds. Concentrate on this thing, 1880. Now close your eyes. What comes to your mind? People always say Macau is a lotus city, city of lotus, right? Now, does this give you any hint that why we are justifiably say we are the lotus city? Okay, I don't want to waste time because we already wasted too much time here. Okay, so I'll give you the answer. A wise old man once told me that, just look. What does this look like? A stem. What does this look like? Or even this one? Does it look like a summertime? One of the lotus leaf is curling up because the sun was too hot? And this little lotus part? Doesn't it give you the imagination enough to say, we are a lotus city? No? Okay. You try to make my life difficult. I'll give you a more difficult life, right? Yeah, we're going to flip it, but just like our friend, previously say, we tend to have the map on the north. Okay, so we're pointing out. Actually, if you look at, astronomy, the sign Taurus, does it look like a Taurus to you? No, not even close. Worse than this. So I'm proud to say that you have to trust me. Okay, and as we can see, we can do more reclamation, and then at the end of the day, of course, it doesn't look like a lotus anymore. Okay, but we have the hidden treasure. It always reminds you of the lotus city. Why? Because every time when the storm comes, when the places get flooded, the places that are dry are the lotus land. Look at this. Right? Now this is the inner harbor, get flooded. That get flooded, here get flooded, everywhere gets flooded, except the lotus land. Okay? Now, this is going into real estate. If you plan to buy a house, where do you want to buy it next? Okay. So, at a low time, you should really be looking. There are lots of good buildings here. Okay, next point. Now from here, we can say, okay, we are gifted with this extra sea area of 85 kilometers. Actually, during the time of the discussion, actually, I make a bold proposal to the government that we should take a much better piece of land. Sea, not land. And we can even promise the central government that we are not going to reclaim anything. But we need to see, because we need to see big enough so that we have an island. We can build on an island. Now, without the island, the only thing we can do is more reclamation in a serious manner. But well, having said that, I think I will tell you the central government have a better idea for you. Okay, now before I proceed further, we can see that our piece of land actually is getting more prosperous, more people, the wealth is swelling up, but it's swelling up much faster than the land. And that gives us a population density that is really overcrowded. Now, if you are an urban planner, it may be bad news, it may be good news, depends on how you want to look at it. Now for us, people in Macau, we want to be compact because we enjoy going down to the ground and go to the shopping, supermarket, everywhere is within 10 minutes. And that's why Macau people don't tend to walk very far. Because, going downstairs is far enough. That's serious. I mean, think about your neighbor. Think about yourself. We change you. Because when you're in Europe or America, you plan to walk a lot more. But since you are in Macau, after 3 years or so, you forget walking. You get on the bus because the bus is too cheap. That's another problem. But we won't talk about that. So actually, that's another spatial problem is we are facing a lot of situations that might not be under our control. But it's worth thinking. Another thing that we were thinking is we have limited land, we have crowded situation, and what are the business sectors that are really growing? Entertainment and gaming, and the hotel and catering, and wholesale. And adding all three top ones is almost 50% of our economy. And that's why we can't shake the casino away, because we are too dependent on it. And unfortunately, look at the last three. Add up to be 2%. And manufacturing is something that we really want to do. In a healthy economy, we should be doing about 20 to 25% manufacturing industry. Huh? Culture. Where is culture? Let's see. This is government statistics. I'm just translating it, my friend. It was from Portuguese. Now it's into English. Don't test me on this. Okay. Well, culture plays part of it in education, which is something, and probably in others. Okay, my friend, when you cannot explain it, it's in others, miscellaneous. Okay, so we have everything covered. And you can see that our economy is healthy and strong with a wonderful tourism place. And even, the cultural relics that we really treasure, the firecracker factory, Yiglong, even we refurbish it, it still get done this way. Okay, so how can you restart the industry that way? You can fool anybody to go inside. Okay, not even tourists. So that is the given conditions that we are facing. And I think as a city planner, we love to look at all of the statistics and facts and probably to see how we can make sense out of it. Now, the government say, okay, we have a wonderful plan for you. And this is the master plan, the statutory plan that was announced in 2020 or so. Okay? And that's supposed to cover 20 years. And you look at the land, now, remember hard, okay? Which we usually don't. I'll tell you. We want to be strengthening our industry. But how much land we have? 2%. We want to be strengthening our commerce sector. How much land? 4%. When you add together, it's 6% only. Okay? And so that, if you remember our chief executive, he says, the 1 + 4, 1 is the casino gaming, which accounts for 13% of the land occupancy, and they are supporting 40% of our GDP. That's what he wants. Now, what are we actually facing? 80%. He wants to cut it in half. That is how much planning we have to plan for. It's not easy. Okay? It's a goal that probably is way, way, way up there. But we need to do it. Can we do it? We need you to think about it. Put us on the map again. Now, with 6% of the land, we are trying to cover the remaining ground of 60% of the economy. Okay? Now, you do the math to see that if we're going to use half of the land to produce 1.5 times the GDP generated from the casino, we really need to make something very profitable out of business. That's why they suggested something which I will follow. Now, the government say, okay, we can continue to reclaim Macau too much more. So they did two things very wonderful. One is in Hangshin Island, the university, the map get disoriented. And here is the University of Macau. And they say, well, okay, the Chinese Medicine Park, and then it should all be here. I was covering 2 maps and probably, make a hiccup. That's all. And so actually, the Chinese Medicine Park is here. The new neighborhood is here. The university is here. And that came from various ways to do it. And at the end of the day, on March 1st this year, the government say, okay, let's close the door, just like what we just did. And Zhuhai and Hangshin Island is separated. Okay? And they have their own customs. So you have to cross the border, not the border. But you know what I'm saying. Now, this is something very new, very serious to us. And actually, probably it hides the answer of how we use the 13% of the land, generate 40% of the economy, and the 6% of the land to do the 60% of the economy. 6%. And with this, we'll increase our land mass in a hurry, because 33 of land Macau, Hangshin alone is 106, 3 times already. So if they continue to use that figure, we probably can resolve the problem in a hurry. And there's a bunch of C2. So that is something that probably the government is helping us to proceed. Now, I want to tell you, Macau people actually just don't go rob people. We don't want to go to the central government and say, give me the land. Actually, I'm telling you that the hardworking people of Macau, like all of us, are actually trying our best to find land so we can grow our economy. What we did in the past in Nap and Sap, What should we do? We reclaim. Okay? And then University of Macau campus. So what do? Release. And then it still doesn't work out. We say, well, go to the Chinese Medicine Park, joint venture. It's a government company, Macau government company, and a Hengqin government company. It still doesn't work out too much. We improve it to have Macau new neighborhood. Anybody qualify and lay their claim on the, okay, this is wonderful. Go see it, it's a lot cheaper than Macau. Okay, but it's not Macau. Okay, by auction. And then finally the government said, the central government said, you've tried hard enough. I'm just gonna give you one last chance, and probably this is our last mission. It's an all-out sharing in Hengqin Island. And probably we have to try to build our economy that way. Now, of course, there's a difficult question I've laid to the people is how do we do the statistics so the GDP will come to Macau in an internationally accepted way of calculation? Now, sharing the tax is easy. I can collect the tax and give it to you. But sharing the GDP is probably a little bit more challenging than between you and me, because it has to be a globally recognized data. And so that is the only challenge. If we can overcome that hurdle, Macau will be on the home stretch. Okay? And then the central government is saying, okay, this is the solution. One, the tourism, I think we will continue to be strong. The four sectors, the health, water and finance, high tech, and the conference, myself, are all ways that we can try to do our best to make it work. And I just share with you is with the limited land, probably we have no choice but to go to Hengqin Island. How do we make the statistic counts? It's going to test our wisdom. But before we can get all this thing done, we have to find ways to be strong in Macau alone. So in the future, some of the considerations. First point is recycling, urban renewal. How do we make effective use of our land? We have 22% of the master plan are under residential. Now, Lot P is building the economic housings and elder housings. Yao Han, which is 7 blocks of buildings that the government is trying to rebuild from 5-story buildings. They're going to take that down and then make it into high rises with the same amount of density, because the people residing there wouldn't change in total number, but would be a much more pleasant environment. But how are we going to do it? And this was my PhD thesis and also my publishing, is how do we make good places last? Now that's St. Lazaro. See that church? That was my plan in 1999. And I, at that time, suggested to the government, if we're going to make that, area a nice European-looking or wonderful-looking places with a roof, because Macau at that time, besides Yao Han, New Yao Han, there's not any place you can go shopping if it's raining. And also creative industry, I suggested to the government, probably the way to go. Okay, at that time, it was too new an idea. And then all these places, we did the ground covering. And so invite everybody, if you have time, go please check it out. It's limping along, but it's getting there someday, hopefully. And then another thing that we should be thinking about, and also we will be redrawing the map, is actually the government connection right now is through Hengqin, we go through Taipa, right? Cotai area. But if you look at the statistics, 85% of the population resided in where? Macau Peninsula. So why you make 85% of the people go all the way, which is not our liking, to the south and cross? Why can't you make our life easier directly from Macau Peninsula, go to Hengqin? Environmentally friendly, saving time, and that's the only way, cheaper and better, so you'll be willing to try to go to Hengqin. So this is a question I posted to the government. Every time when I go to the NPC, I make that similar suggestion in some way. hopefully that they can consider this, because with this crossing, in any way, shape, or form acceptable, so as everybody agrees, but directly are required. Otherwise, people are not going to do it. That's all. That's it. Because our bus are not convenient enough. You need direct bus to go. Just imagine one day, if you tell me, say, "Oh, we'll be waiting for you in the new neighborhood by the train station," and when you come out, you flash your Macau ID, you get out, and you join me for a dinner. That would be a wonderful place. That would really be Macau new neighborhood. Definitely. Thank you for your wonderful support. You make me feel so good. And then the last thing is, with all this thing, we have overcome another hurdle. It's unifying the standards. Even the water quality standard, the school standards, actually all different between the two places, Macau and China, Chui and Hengqin. Now, how do we make compromises? Because the simple rule is the most stringent one wins. But that doesn't work. Because when you make a standard, you encourage something and you try to discourage something else. Like, I'm blocking this door so you can get out this way. But if you copy me every time, I'll be blocking that, and Marco will be blocking that, you have nowhere to go. So that will be something that we'll have to think about in the future too. So I'm looking at Macau in a way that probably, not a map making people will look at, but probably if we get all this thing done, we can put Macau on the map again in a different way. Thank you very much. Sorry for the little comment. Okay.
José, thank you so much. Brilliant presentation again on these urban aspects of Macau, and putting also, the urban areas into perspective with the GDP. And yes, a big question on the future of Macau, how we can do a proper diversification, and now with the new Hengqin plan. So thank you very much. A lot of good information. And now we are going to pass to our third presentation today. So it's Marco Caboara, as you know, from Hong Kong Science and Technology University, and his specialty is really about cartography. So Marco, without further ado, the stage is yours. I'm gonna.
Thank you. Let's see if this works.
Please tell a story about.
Then yes, I will start telling a story. But first of all, about who I am. I mean, I'm an Italian, come from Genova, but I've been in Hong Kong for more than 15 years. And my specialty initially was classical Chinese. I've been studying Chinese bamboo strips and classical Chinese grammar. But in the past 7 years, I've been working on maps. In the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, there is a collection of maps of China. It was built in the 90s, maps from European printed map from 1500 to 1700. And I specialize on these maps. I wrote a book about these maps. And actually, in the past few years, I also build a collection, and we managed to buy many other maps, Chinese and Japanese, from 15 and 1700. So my approach is really quite on the objects. What we saw until now, let's see if this works. Yes, what we saw until now, this is simply the book I wrote, something that came out recently of the South China Morning Post. It's always nice when you have an impact locally for what you have done, the book that I wrote on Western maps of China. What I do is really based on the object. I've been working on this object. My training is in classical Chinese and in history, so I will telling you things about these objects. And basically, we already saw in the two previous talks, there are theories about what you do with maps, okay? What matters to you? You show what matters to you. At the same time, in the second talk, we saw things that you do with maps. I mean, you basically show projects. You tell stories about the past, but also stories about the future. And for me, really, the emphasis is on the stories you can tell through maps, through specific maps. And I will start, before we get into the mapping of Macau, I will start with this map. This is the right one, yeah. I will start with this map that basically tells you how the world looked like for Europeans. But I'm going to talk about European maps of China and Macau. In 1493, I mean, it's a year after the discovery of America, but you wouldn't tell from this map. This map actually gives you an image of the world. It's in print. It was printed in Nuremberg. It was a very important illustrative book that really showed the world to Europeans. But there were only two maps. It was the map of the world, Africa, Europe, Asia, connected with the Bible, Sem, Japhet, and Cam. And also what were called at the time the monsters of the East. Basically strange creatures that you expect as a European to find, probably something somewhere India or something. Now, a map like this, again, just 1 year after the discovery of America, what do you see? Well, there is Serica here. There is actually the old name for China, but there is certainly not even a coast. This was the world that was known to Ptolemy. This was the world that basically was known 1,500 years before the map was made. Because Ptolemy was a geographer and an astronomer, but his aim was not to show all the world. It was to show all the world that is known to him. Ekumene means the inhabitable world, the world of which we have data. So this is what people knew in Europe about the world. On the other hand, 10 years after the map was made, the world became so much larger. Columbus found America, and Portuguese navigators passed Cape of Good Hope and arrived in Asia. And there were different ideas on how you would relate these objects, these geographical objects, to each other. Where was Asia? On which part of an atlas you would show it? Close to America, where America and Asia connected. This is the map, that we saw before, the Cantino map. This is the map that reflects this expansion of knowledge. And it is really a mixture between what you care about, as we saw. I mean, you care more about this side than about that side, but also what you know about. I mean, you know about the coast of Brazil, but you don't know anything about what else is there in America. You know about the Caribbean. And you know that there is India, and you know that there is something like China, and now you show a sea, but you don't show anything else beside that because nobody had actually been there. So the other maps I'm going to show you are actually maps about China and Macau. But here I'm kind of giving you a understanding of how I'm going to make a transition between the maps I know best, which are maps of China in print, and the maps of Macau, about which I would also say a few things, that they are very different objects. So Ptolemy himself basically starts his geography with this contrast between maps of the world that are like the whole face, and local maps, he called them chorography, now we will call them topographic maps, that are like bits of a face, like an eye or an ear. At the same time, you use mathematical projections for the big image, the whole, and also basically for China. And basically you treat these local maps as landscape, and you can portray them in landscape, and you know them in a very different way. You know them in the way so that if you are actually from Macau, you will be able to tell from some of the early maps, okay, that church is really in that place. We can know it with certainty. The other maps of China we have a general statement about the country that you cannot certainly georeference, like you can georeference a city map. Now, the first map that is printed about China, again, has an unusual orientation, west on top. Now, we've been talking about the east on top for religious regions and orientation with the Orient. This is west on top, most likely just for fitting the page. I mean, sometimes really these objects have their own special rules. The rules is you want to display them on a double page folio atlas. It fits the page this way. There are things that are known quite well: Southeast Asia, Malacca, Champa, which was part of Vietnam at the time. Japan is known and shown Japan, just like very vaguely. South China is known, Cantam. The names are the names that actually use a Portuguese spelling at the time, X as Shi for Shandong, Xantong, Shandong. Great Wall here. And at the same time, blowing up this portion, Macau, shown as Macau. So they do show Macau because it's important to them. In fact, this part of South China is known fairly well. When you go north, the fact always that already that Shandong is not a peninsula tells you that is not recognizable as peninsula, tells you that they don't have a clear clue of what is going on in the north. How do they make a map like this? Well, clearly they have information about this, they have some information about the coast, and then they use a Chinese map. So we don't know exactly which Chinese map, but we know that Chinese maps were used. I will show you other cases where instead it's very clear which Chinese maps were used. On the other hand, we start alternating about maps of China and maps of Macau, these very different objects, really, that follow very different rules. This map of Macau is the first city map of Macau. It was published in Europe, in Frankfurt, in a large collection of travels. And certain elements are recognizable. There is a cross in, it should be Misericordia Square. And there is a landscape that you can recognize here. There is a connection with the mainland. The rest gives you a character for the city. There are Europeans that go around with this umbrella and this palanquin. So it's a very general, iconic view of the city. This is a map that, again, is from a larger area. And this map also, many of these maps have their own story. I'm not telling them all because it would be too long. I'm just showing you some snapshots. But this map has a story that is lost. You just have it in an image from the 50s. Maybe a private collector will make it resurface sooner or later, but it's enough. We have the outlines. It's a map of the peninsula with Chinese part of the city shown here with an intriguing house of the Mandarin official given there, of unclear meaning and location. This cartographer produced actually great manuscript maps of China and East Asia. But manuscript maps are, at less copy, are prone to be lost. The maps that I concentrate on are printed maps, which are actually preserved in many collections. This map is an English map. In itself, it doesn't show much more information about China than the previous map, but the orientation is familiar. Instead, the information about Japan and Korea is larger. But it's also a map, a Baroque map. And a Baroque map has its own convention. There are figures at the side. Specifically here, there is a Chinese woman and a Chinese man. And also cities on top. And at the very center, Macau. So Macau was a very important center in China for anyone that made a map of China in 1600. Again, alternation. And again, the alternation between manuscript and printed maps, because the maps of China are a genre that is printed in atlases for the wider European public, and they have a high demand. There is reason to print thousands of them. Maps of Macau are basically an affair, in this case, of security, and so there are books about fortification and fortresses, there are manuscript copies. And they show details, and they show details about the fortifications of Macau. And this obviously gives us an important view of what Macau was for a limited audience. This is the map that really was considered the map of China in 1600. This map was made based on Chinese atlases. We know the author Martino Martini, an Italian Jesuit, he came back from China to Europe with a printed Chinese atlas, and he basically made a map for China and a map for each province of China. He printed it in Amsterdam. That was the center of my production at the time. These maps are very attractive visually with all these chinoiserie elements. And there being a map for each provinces, there is a map of Guangdong here. And it just blew up the River Delta vision of this map. And actually, many of these maps are available as original items in the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And at the moment, there is an exhibition. There will be an exhibition until June 7 that exhibits many of these maps in Chinese and in English, meaning Western and Chinese maps. Whatever map we have in original is also digitized, but also they are available in the Macau USD large collection of images of maps of China. So in this case, because actually the USD website happened to be down, I would use it. It's my own institution, but it seems the USD of Macau USD is more resilient. So, but it also makes a connection with the speaker. No, at 5 p.m. today. Okay, at 5 p.m. today, when I wanted to take a screenshot of the River Delta of this map. This thing just happened accidentally. But actually, there is a big difference between our two repositories, the fact that basically we only have images of map that we own and we show in the original, some of which in the exhibition. And Macau USD focuses on a much larger but mostly virtual repository of maps. So if you want to see the images, that's a much convenient venue to go. If you want to see many of the original, then please come to Hong Kong and see the original maps. But anyway, you will see that Macau basically is on the wrong side of the River Delta here. These maps are based on Chinese maps and are based on observation, but at the same time, they are maps of a larger area. They're not topographical maps, they're not landscape style maps where basically surveying was possible. Obviously, to a certain extent, sea charts were making measures, but basically you will see most of the printed maps of China that are covered until 1700, not based on surveys. Not based on survey, they're just like wide visualization of an area. On the other hand, thousands of these maps were available. The average European that was interested in this issue would be able to have them at home. Again, a manuscript, very large, beautifully drawn map. In this case, preserved in Florence. The Medici were great map collectors. They would get maps from Portuguese and Dutch sources. Basically, Winkenbones, a Dutch cartographer, used Portuguese sources to create this very large manuscript map of Macau. And this is just a blown-up version of the Church of St. Paul. And again, you use them if you want really to reconstruct the changes in Macau cartography. On the other hand, they are manuscript, and each one has differences, and there are all the accidents that are related to manuscript production. You will see what I focus on are the prints. That's why I spend time with the print. This is my expertise. When the Manchu dynasty, the Qing and Kanxi, the second emperor, came to power, he was extremely interested to map his own kingdom, and this actually was done as a survey. This is the first map of China that comes out of a survey. It was done by the Qing government in collaboration as experts of maps and cartography with Jesuits. The Jesuits got the original Chinese maps and had them translated them and print them in Europe. And that's how we get this French map of China, which really shows that China is called carte la plus générale. So it was a general map of China that was basically showing China with this area. But this one, being the most general, has Manchuria, Xinjiang, Tibet, and actually goes up to the Caspian Sea. There are no claims on borders here, but it's a vision of China basically as a power that is striding across Eurasia. And again, following the same format, which actually is the format of Chinese atlases. Chinese printed atlases from 1500 would have this format. One general map of China, one map for each province. And these maps were all originally in Chinese. But then, when printed in France, they had this very elaborate cartouches and illustration. Now, if you blow up this map of Guangdong, then you get a more acceptable position for Macau within the Pearl River Delta, and also more, to a certain extent, realistic view of the Pearl River Delta. But again, maps are also about selection. This is Xinan, so the Xinan district where Hong Kong basically was situated at the time, but you wouldn't see Hong Kong Island here because out of all the islands on the coast, Hong Kong has nothing special for the Qing government at the time. So it's just not selected to be shown on the map. I generally emphasize this because in Hong Kong, everyone is always asking me, where do we see Hong Kong? Well, you don't see it on maps until later, 1800 basically. But again, you see the administrative district under which Hong Kong is controlled, and you would see, if you have C charts, you can see something more. Now back to local maps, and this is printed. It's printed because it's attached to a large report of the McCartney Embassy to China, which was really a big commercial attempt to create relationship between England and China. It was also, from the point of view of printing, a very expensive kind of project that created maps and illustrations that visualized China for Europeans at the end of 1700. Part of this is a map of Macau that is basically both a sea chart and also an image of the city. There are soundings here, but now this one is in print. Now Macau is getting more known also in England, also to the European public. This map, and actually we're towards the end of my very quick overview, this map is a very peculiar German map, 1834. It's basically the time when Macau was, it's shown both here as the zero meridian, a very rare, unique case where basically Macau is put at the center really of the world, but basically at the center of this chart. And you also have a map that is very similar to the preceding one of the bay. And then you have views, for example, here the Camoish Gardens. But basically a view of the Pearl River Delta. And this serves both as a sea chart, as a city plan, and with profile of the coast. The last map that I have here is actually a map that is partly, again, a story told, meaning it's a project. What Macau started to be, how Macau started to be transformed at the same time. Not all the elements that are shown on these maps are anything more than projects. So this is the end of my overview. Thank you.
Grazie mille, Marco. Thank you so much. It's so great, to have this perspective from people that, because, imagine there are thousands and thousands of maps, and really to know those that really matter, and having you here presenting some of the first representative of China. It was so another great presentation. Thank you so much, Marco, for coming from Hong Kong for this talk. We really appreciate. And now, our fourth speaker of the day, Professor José Alves. He's going to talk more on the economic side, of the evolution of Macau during these 500 years.
My pleasure. So a little story to start. So as a background, for those who don't know me, but I came to Macau in 1997, March 31st, 1997. And I came here to be a master student of the first master program at the University of St. Joseph at that time. So I completed it in 2 years later, and then I worked with the first director, Father João Lourenço. And then in 2003, I went to do my PhD in Massachusetts. And after living there for 4 years, I thought it's more interesting to live in China. So I decided to come back, and I have been here since then. So I worked then at USJ until 6 years ago when I changed to the City University. So I'm going to talk to you about the economic activity behind the maps. So I'm interested in maps. I have paid great attention to the maps, but my concern is always what people do in Macau and what are the economic activities that happen in Macau and why they happen. Okay, so I put together some slides to share with you ideas that I have been already discussing with my students and colleagues. And I'm pleased to see here some economists who know more about this than myself, but I think it's a good topic for us to discuss. So I'm going to briefly review the economic history of Macau during these cycles. As you see, the cycles are getting shorter and shorter. So the golden age of trade, 16th and 17th centuries, and then 2 centuries of stagnation, economic stagnation, decline in the late 19th century, resilience, stagnation again in the first half of the 20th century with the First and Second World Wars. And then after the Second World War, the great start of the tourism, manufacturing, and some services. And then the gaming growth already in the last 20 years. And then I will use the history to discuss, I think, important questions about today. So José Chui has left, but I think I would like to discuss one day with him some of these things. So the golden age of trade of Macau is in the 16th and 17th centuries. The maps that Marco Caboara has shared tell us a lot about what happened. The history is well known, but I want to emphasize always here 2 things. What were the main industries and what were the technologies behind these industries? So the trade was done by sea. So the main technology were maritime technologies. The caravels, the ships, the navigation instruments, and cartography. All these maps were extremely important for that. The trade, the shipping, and the commodities were the main economic activities happening. So this all happened because Macau was in a strategically located place. Challenges. What happened? By the late 17th century, the Dutch and the British appeared competing also in the same economic activities using more advanced technologies, and they took over the business that Macau and Portuguese were doing. Then, so we went through 2 centuries of stagnation, economic stagnation. Basically, not much significant helped happen in Macau because the Dutch and the British were doing that in Asia and connecting to Europe. So during those years, we had some traditional industries, you know, the tea, the opium, some textiles, sugar was manufactured and distributed from Macau to Guangdong, and gambling. Gambling was already popular. Not much technology were introduced in Macau during those years. Okay, so there was the Industrial Revolution in Europe, and the British, mostly the British, took advantage of that to basically occupy different places around the world, and Macau didn't take advantage of that. What were the challenges and the constraints during that time? Macau faced challenges, continued to always be small, limitations imposed by China on direct trade. The British and the Dutch continued to introduce better maritime technologies in ships. And then the East India companies from British and from Netherlands were better than the Portuguese East India companies. So clearly they were ahead of Portugal and Macau. So in the late 19th century, we see a economic decline of Macau. So 2 centuries. Stagnation, eventually without innovation, without new technologies, the city declined. Gambling, incense, matches, firecrackers, these were the industries that existed at that time. We have still the firecrackers place in Taipei as one of the examples. But something interesting happened. The Chinese companies started to enter and appear in Macau. And they came to introduce new industries which were important, and they set the foundation for other industries in the 20th century. What were the main problems? Lack of resources, again, territorial limitations, and over-reliance on mainland China, okay? And then we enter in the 20th century. Again, this coincided the period of the First and the Second World War. Basically, Macau showed to be a very resilient city. And I think that is, for me, the main interesting thing is that the people of Macau, the mix of the cultures, provides to this city a characteristic which is very unique, resilience. So it was still dominated by traditional industries like incense, matches, firecrackers, but started to appear here some new technologies and new companies, especially telecommunications, cars, buses, and airplanes, aviation. Okay, so these were new industries appearing in Macau. Of course, coming here mostly through Hong Kong companies that provided these services. We see a great influx of Chinese migrants, which was very important and still today. And tourism started to emerge with hotels and restaurants to serve the tourists from Hong Kong, okay, and some from China, but mostly from Hong Kong. So we remain small, focus on few traditional industries. And then after the Second World War, the city changed. Okay, the city changed, and this is where the modern Macau, I would say, starts. Manufacturing companies appeared, first textile and garments in the 50s and 60s. In the 70s and 80s, electronics, watches and toys. And then in the 90s, we start to see services, tourism, gambling growing a lot, banking also growing a lot. And this is together with infrastructure developments by the Portuguese administration and preparing for the handover a few years later. However, we faced strong regional competition from other cities in Southeast Asia. So the manufacturing could not survive for a long time. And then we entered the 21st century with the booming of gaming that everybody knows. So gambling is the main industry. It has been. The main technologies in the last 20 years basically are related to gambling and gaming. So construction technologies that also were introduced when they built these new large hotels, and other things like surveillance, security, and telecommunications. Then what are other factors important here during the last 20 years? Infrastructure development. Okay, so large and important infrastructures like the light train, some sports facilities, the new bridge, the border checkpoints. MICE industry developed still today. We talk is one of the industries that we still want to grow. And there are diversification efforts already during the last 20 years to try to diversify the economy, not so much concentrated in tourism and gambling. Then today, so this is what I think for me is the most important, and what I always discuss with the students is what is Macau today, what can Macau do in the future. So we are recovering still from COVID, especially the small and medium enterprises are still suffering a lot. You see many shops still for rent. and maybe they will never be able to recover given the nature of their resources. There are some geopolitical tensions between China and the US, which definitely condition the economic opportunities. Labor shortage, gaming law reforms, asking the casino operators to enter in activities which are not related to their main business. Regional competition from other cities, also in gaming, and continuous over-reliance in mainland China, and difficulties to diversify the economy, even though with a lot of ideas and incentives, but still difficulty to diversify. So I found a paper recently, even though the paper is not there, talks about specialization and diversification. It's a paper about 231 cities in China from 1998 to 2005. And they found that when the industries are mature, the best only strategy for them is to continue to be specialized. That means for the tourism industry, we should not ask them to diversify. We should ask them to continue to specialize. For new fast-growing industries, yes, we can use specialization and diversification strategies. Specialization will provide focused resource, labor pools, and more important, knowledge spillovers. Likewise, diversity facilitates knowledge transfer. So these two key words, knowledge spillovers, knowledge transfers, are for me the most important opportunity for Macau. Because when we compare these four production factors, land, labor, capital, and knowledge, and how they have been used throughout the history of Macau, we know in the 16th and 17th centuries, land was the main factor of production. Land, not the space, because it didn't exist, was actually the location of Macau. Okay? In 1950 to 90s was labor resources, the manufacturing industries which emerged because labor costs were low. And in the last 20 years, the major reason for this boom is investment. Dr. José Alves has made a very important point already in a few times. The last time he mentioned investment is the most important factor of production in Macau in the last 20 years. And for me, the future has to be knowledge. So cannot be land, cannot be labor, cannot be capital. They are exhausted, already finished. The next one has to be knowledge. So we have to do something to improve knowledge. So priority to knowledge sectors. This is what I think we should do. We should specialize in tourism and diversify into education and healthcare. We should develop high-tech supporting industries, provided that they are related to tourism. If they are not related to tourism, it may be almost impossible to create diversification. And what I mean by diversification related to tourism? Well, tourism uses energy, so we can develop expertise about energy. People have to eat, so we should develop expertise about food science and food technology. We should develop expertise about logistics, otherwise we will never be able to connect to the Portuguese-speaking markets. So we need to know. And we should be also developing AI technologies. So we have to target research and development investments in these areas. Last, we should prioritize advanced knowledge sectors over those that need labor, land, and capital. So Dr. Engineer José Chui was here talking about the rehabilitation of the city. So still talking about the concept of land, which is important. We need to live in a clean, proper city with standards to attract the tourists. But ultimately, that is not going to be the the source of diversification for Macau and for the long-term sustainability of the city. If we look at the population demographic pyramid, it's like this today. So we have a lot of people there in the middle who are middle-aged, getting older, and we have very few persons who are young. So we have to do something. The pyramid is not like that, okay? It should not be like that. It's not sustainable. I think we must invest in education because it's the foundation of a knowledge-based society, and we must invest also in health. And when I say education, we have already 10 higher education institutions in Macau, 10. We should make them at the world-class universities. And then we can transform this, which is today a kind of a simple, small industry, in a world-class industry for Macau to serve mainland China. And we should transform the health industry, which now has 4 hospitals, also in world-class hospitals to serve mainland China and other countries, okay? But we are not thinking about these industries. We talk about big health. I don't know what means big. I just know health is health. And we should invest in these 2 areas. Oops. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, José. Another great presentation. I think it was great also the perspective of, as you mentioned, right, the advantages of the location. It started with the location, right, just across Guangdong, then labor, then investment and knowledge, right? Knowledge is always very important for the future development of the cities. And now, Angela, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Especially someone like you with your large experience as a librarian and also now with the global mapping initiative of Macau University Science Center of Technology. Is really a pleasure to have you tonight. If you want to tell a little story while I'm...
So my presentation will be a little bit different. I'll present our database, online database with some of our maps. The database is something that we've been doing with a software Chinese company, but we are building it from scratch. So everything it's according to our standards. And actually we are making preparations to do an upgrade still this year, hopefully. But right now what we have is what I will present here. So the Special Collection Department of the MUST Library was established in 2013, and it was the same year the Global Mapping of Macau project started. I joined the project in 2019, and since then our special collection, it's not only maps, but also early prints, paintings, photos, rubbings, etc. So the project, we search, select, acquire, organize, research, catalog, store, exhibit, cooperate and publish our maps. We are an online database, so we focus on searching maps of Macau in libraries all around the world, and then we acquire the digital image of the map. In MUST library we keep one facsimile, one physical facsimile of the map, and then we have the online database. We also did some publishing with, we compiled some atlases and we publish. Our last publication was the Global Mapping of Macau Shangshan, and Shangshan is the bigger island where the peninsula of Macau is attached to. Hopefully this year we will publish the Atlas of Macau, in which we are compiling a little bit more of 50 maps of Macau. So this is the main outlook of our database. And like I said, our database, it's not only focused on the global mapping of Macau project, but we also have, for instance, the Peter Crush and Claude Kinder Digital Archive, which is focused on the first railway train in China. And we also have the Macau Image Gallery. And this is the outlook of the global mapping of Macau page. So here I did a simple search with Macau on the search bar, and then we have I already select the only available online, because we do have some that we are not able to show online. Some libraries don't provide us the licensing, so I already selected the ones they are available online. And we have 3 main views, so a list, a grid, and the grid only allows you to see a little preview of the map. So this is my preferred one, which shows you the complete map in a thumbnail. We do have some sorting, so right now we only have those 2 options. We'll hopefully have more in the future. It's by date or in alphabetical order. And then here on the left we have a search, a bar that will allow us to do some limitations on our search by subject. So because we are talking about maps, the subject is almost always locations and places. Then we have the provenance, so where we got the map from. And then also author, and a little further down, it's because of a lot of our maps are inside books, they are not loose sheets. So if they are inside the book, you can also search by in which book they are from, and of course the year. In the advanced search, you can add more than one search selection, so you can choose title, author, year, of course, as well. And you also can already click the option just to show you the ones that are available online. When our maps are not available online, this is what will appear. So this one is a map of Guangdong from the Vatican Library that we are not able to display online. So here on the left, you still have the information about the map, but you cannot see it. And for these cases, the only option is to go to the MUSD library and to see it, because we do have the facsimile and you can see it in our library. Here I have one example. So this is a wood folding screen, actually from the Orient Foundation in Lisbon. They were very generous to give it to our project. So this is the main outlook, and this is, for instance, one of the zoom options. So all of our maps, we do acquire them in high quality, so you can zoom in and zoom out and to really read. Here it's a map of the Camões Garden with also a plan of the house, and this one here, as you can see, also the zoom option, so you can read the legend that is here on the left. There on the bottom right, only one, because we do have some maps that require more than one image. This one, only one image for the map, but if I'm cataloging, for instance, an atlas, maybe inside it will have 20 maps, 50 maps, and you can see it all in one. So there on the top we have the options of the link and then also zoom to make the map a wider view, which will look like something like this. And also the rotation option, which is great for when you're seeing, for instance, nautical charts, because usually the charts, the writing, it's not in line, it follows the coastline, so sometimes you have to turn the map around to be able to read. For instance, here I did a rotation so that we can see the plan of the house more clearly, the stairs, and then the plan. And here on the left side is the information about the map. So here we have the title and then the subject, in this case is the garden, and then the physical description, one sheet, and then the measurements, the publication. This one was made in Macau in 1794 because it was one of the maps made during the first embassy, the British embassy to China, and the McCartney actually stayed here in the house. So this is one of the men that accompanied in the embassy, did the map here in 1794. Here we have some notes about the map. So we always talk about the original, how it was made, what is the technique, the original size. Also the printed version that you can see in MUST, the printed version is always the closest as possible to the original. even the material of the paper. And here, the provenance, this one is from British Library, and then the reference where you can find the link through the British Library database where this map is in. Also the scale of the map, and then the author. This one is part of a collection. It's the drawing number 78, so I give the title of the collection where it belongs, and then the number, and then you have the URL. So the URL, it will take us to the main catalog of the MUST library. And I always advise it because the database, it's a display database. So it will focus mainly on you to be able to see the image and rotate the image, study it. But here in the catalog, this is where we really make the difference. So the cataloging, as you can see, we give the title, all the creators connected to the map. We have on first the map maker, and then the collection of drawings actually belong to two kings, so they are there as former owners. The collection where it belongs to, the subject, and then the description is really where we mark the difference. So the description is basically we do a research on the map, and then in this field, we try to give some information about the cartographer or map maker, also describe the map and why it was made, when it was made, any history or content that is connected to the map. And then here on the bottom, I give the reference. So in this case, I gave only a small reference from the Macau magazine. But if it's a more studied map, I always give a long list of reference. So the user can actually just know the basic information about the map. But if they want to take their research further, I already provide a reference list that they can take forward. So here, so you can see, for instance, here on the left is my own cataloging, and on the right is the actually cataloging on the British Library. So you can see the difference because we already do a long research on each resource that we have that we can provide to the user. This is why, even though right now we have about 10,000 images of maps, on the database we only have a little bit more of 1,500. So because this takes a long time to research and put up, but yeah, so this is my presentation.
Angela, thank you so much, and it's really a great tool. We used it a lot to source some of the information. And I would like to ask you, so I was able to visit the collection of maps because MUST has a huge collection of maps. If someone from here, from the audience, Monday or Tuesday wants to go there, visit the area I went, is open to public as well? Okay. I really recommend you guys to visit because it is amazing and unique collection here in Macau. So we are arriving to an end. We passed totally the time already. It's already almost dinner time. So I will only allow maybe very few questions, 2 or 3 questions, if someone wants to ask some of the questions to the others, even though we already have 2 of the speakers that went away. If not, if there is no question, we all go for dinner. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.